I'd like to clarify a little bit what Paul was talking about, the Facebook capability and the like feature and whatever. We had a request that came in from the recycling committee where basically they wanted to be, what their request was to have essentially an email list where if they wanted to get information out to members of the public who wish to be put on this list or whatever, that they could do so via email. I passed that on to Paul, and then that's when Paul suggested, well, I understand the problem, but maybe there's a better way of solving it, and referenced the Facebook-like capability. The other discussion that Paul and I had, and I think we were in agreement on that, is we don't necessarily need a whole bunch of, whether it's email or like capability or whatever, distribution lists. In other words, one for the recycling committee, one for the energy committee, whatever. Maybe what we need is just basically two lists. The one that exists, which is essentially the emergency operations, which is limited in terms of the number of bytes you can push out because it's going to cell phones and pagers and that type of thing. And then a second list, whether it's a like, whether it's an email, whether it's both, that's available for a more general push out as opposed to the emergency. So that's kind of what drove that whole issue. I think if we're going to take that route, and I think it's a good route to take, such that whether it's the recycling committee ultimately or the rec department or the energy department or even a department like public works for a non-emergency, I think we've got to find a way to get the word out, as we've seen based on what lack of success there's been in the emergency one. I mean, literally, think about it. It takes, I signed up, it took me 30 seconds, 45 seconds, I'm on the list, and yet we've only had 300 people who wouldn't want to know that you don't put your trash out that day because there's a problem. It makes your life easier. I think people just don't know about it. So I think if we decide to go ahead with this, we've got to consider things like maybe little cards that you hand out when people renew their auto registration that make them aware of it, or maybe at the transfer station or something like that. The final question I've got, Paul, in terms of the web hosting, which from what you said appears to be driven by bandwidth limitations that you're experiencing today, would you be looking then at, as you and I discussed, considering other types of hosting environments as alternatives, maybe more powerful alternatives to like Server 2008 and IIS and whatever?
Most of these places I'm looking at, that's what they do. They give you, they deal with large businesses and governments. So they have the software and they have everything in, and they have the, if you put up a Jaluma server, I'm going to guarantee you, you're going to get hacked. That's saying target. I have sat down and watched the FTP server roll as some computer out of China tries to hack into our IIS server. Having a server, you're vulnerable. These guys, they have full-time security people that sit down and watch for the funny stuff. They can actually deal with it immediately. If I'm at the fire station, I can't be watching that. If I'm at Public Works, I'm not watching. Or even if I'm upstairs, I'm not watching it. Because my job takes me through the entire compound, all of the town. It's not just limited to this building or limited to my desk. So I just assume give it out to a company that's what they do.
One of the things that when Paul and I started discussing this that I found very attractive is that as you get into these more powerful web hosting environments, you've got much more sophisticated search capabilities on there. So if somebody comes in and they're looking for something, and obviously we've got gigabytes of information on there today, what I found, for example, with Keen is if I typed something in, the search engine would virtually, the 3 or 4 examples I tried, would find it right away. So even when you don't know, it's almost like, you know, the difference between Google, which is very, very effective in terms of finding stuff on the internet, versus, I don't know if you've ever tried to go to the state website and search in RSA, you get 150,000
a lot of hits.
150,000 hits, 149,000 weren't what you were looking for. So anyway, those are my comments. Thanks,
Do you have
Paul.
any questions, Ben?
I didn't understand necessarily all the conversations that's occurred here, but I want to thank Paul. This might have been in progress for a long time, but I know that it was mentioned by one of my fellow selectmen not too many weeks ago. So it looks as if you're reacting very quickly. So
thank you.
And the outsourcing of the hosting is not going to cause you a major budget problem
Well,
for this year?
well, unfortunately, we've never spent money on the website, and we were told not to. So there's, we'll have to make do.
It's a rough order of magnitude as far as what you would think a year's cost would be?
I'm probably looking between $4,000 to $7,000 a year.
We'll have to consider that as things is. Where that can come from, I suppose, is the observation. Thank you so much.
All right, sir.
I don't really have any questions.
Thank you very much for coming. You did a great job with the
Okay.
presentation.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Paul.